at the end of the day, we would want what any parent would want, which is answers to find out what happened.
There were 300 to 400 people out on Horns Island. You mean to tell me nobody saw anything?
3 people are facing federal charges in the Nolan Wells case. They're charged with threatening a judge, a witness, and local officials in the investigation of his death. You'll remember Wells was found dead after a 4th of July boat trip with friends to an island off Mississippi's Gulf Coast. There's been a lot of questions raised about his death. Investigators say none of the 3 people charged know Wells or his family. An Illinois man is accused of threatening to kill a witness in the case and their family. A woman in Ohio is accused of making bomb threats against 2 county offices in Mississippi, and a California man is accused of sending a Facebook threat that a bomb would be mailed to the Chancery Court judge connected to this case. So far, no arrests or suspects have been named in Wells' death. An independent autopsy lists his cause of death as undetermined.
And he also gave Nolan a ride to school on multiple occasions. So it's very confusing. I don't know why a young man would say that he's friends and literally be emotional when he talked about Nolan. I mean, he literally cried and teared up off camera. And I felt like it was very genuine. And for the parents to say that they don't know him at all and won't even consider the fact that he believed he was friends with Nolan, it's very shocking to me, and I don't know if they're being genuine because you don't always know your children's friends,
right? Or
are they still trying to hold on to this agenda that no one who disagrees with the narrative of racism can possibly be associated with them because it destroys their money. Well, I'm not saying the parents' money grift, but Benjamin Crump's money grift.
Attorney Ben Crump, who's representing the family, said during a news conference that independent experts will review audio from the July 4th boat trip. They will also analyze tide conditions where Wells' body was found. The update comes days after subpoenas were issued for the teen's social media and digital records. His body was found July 6th, 2 days after he was reported missing after a holiday boat trip to Horn Island with friends.
And if I personally want to know what happened to my child, the first person I'm going to talk to is the people who last saw him alive. I don't understand why they take the position of saying it's us versus y'all, and now you want to subpoena phones and do things like that, which are going to take, I don't know, months for it to come out, and they may not even be granted. I mean, you got to think, Nolan was an adult. He wasn't a kid. So some of these social media platforms may not even grant them access to his account if they don't have somewhat of a legal search warrant. So I just wish that they would have come together as a community and got to the bottom of this, got information, and then shared it to the public instead of, making it a divisive thing up front.
Yeah. Brandon, we're still waiting on the toxicology report, but from interviews with Nolan's friends, we do know that drinking heavily was involved, and that Nolan Wells was drinking. And you have on good authority that drugs potentially could have been involved as well.
Any parent that would be in this situation, you would do anything to find out what happened to your child.
Going out to Horn Island was very revealing to me, because the initial statements from people who were talking about this, especially the Nolan Wells family, that they were acting as if they just dropped Nolan off at an abandoned island where no one was around to watch him get murdered or something. And then now you go and look at it and you go, well, no, there was tons of people there. That gives me encouragement that somebody saw what happens. But it also proves in many ways that they didn't just abandon him as if he was a little kid on the island by himself. So,
in this newly released sound, you can make out somebody saying, "Wake the F up." What does that mean? I'm not resting till I find out if that's real.
And then also, I want to believe his mother. I don't have any reason necessarily, because I don't know her personally, to believe that she would just lie. But when I look at the facts, why wouldn't she communicate with with Warren and their family? They showed me text messages, they showed me phone calls where they called and reached out to her.
Now, the Daily Mail has identified a 19-year-old young woman who Nolan was last seen speaking to. Now, his friend said he chose to stay behind on Horn Island with that woman. But the woman's sister is claiming that's not true. He was ready to get back on the boat that he came on. Are all these differing accounts and a lack of understanding concerning?
It makes sense that he went off to see about a girl, as they say, and that they had conversation, and that he decided to go back and be with friends. So I think it's more of a timing issue rather than something that is untrue on either end. I think both can be true at the same time.
Nolan's death is going to the Mississippi grand jury. The DA said something interesting, that the evidence will not be public until the grand jury reviews it first. The DA says this is to protect the integrity of the investigation and that the grand jury will ultimately decide if someone will be charged. Jennifer, do you believe someone could be charged in his death? Is this just an accident gone terribly wrong?
Well, with what we know, in other words, review of all the surveillance information we have, with actually getting to hear from one of the witnesses, one of his best friends that was there throughout the situation, listening to the calls that were made, the Coast Guard contact, as well as the riptide situation in that area. When you add it all together, what we see publicly seems to be an accident. Having said that, of course, there's going to be information. 60 witnesses interviewed. I doubt if this, from what we know, will come back with the true bill.
All right. Hopefully the families, both families, get some answers. Jennifer.
Those two guys went out to Horn Island. They went on the island. They canvassed around. They went and ran a grid with the boat, put the drone up, looking for any signs of Nolan. Did not find anything. By late afternoon, some weather was moving in offshore. So out of abundance of caution, they came back in, and that's when we decided that we were going to put a plane up. The next morning on 6th July, we wanted to find this boy. I wanted him to bring him back to his mother alive and well. I knew that the further we got away from the last time he was seen alive, the lower chances that would be.
I'm a mom. I have two sons, so it hit home for me.
Today's testament is that we want answers. It's not about vengeance. It's not about accusations. It's about the truth, and it's about transparency.
A lot of times, these stories go unnoticed.
By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the mood on Horn Island had shifted. The morning had been easy. Swimming, moving between boats, catching up with people from back home. But by early afternoon, something underneath the surface of that day had quietly changed. The crowd was still there. The boats were still anchored. The sun was still up. And Nolan Wells was still on the island. Warren Hudson places himself near Nolan around that 3 p.m. mark. That is the last time Warren says he personally saw Nolan alive. At that moment, Nolan was sitting near the boat he had arrived on, and he was with Katie, a girl he had met or connected with on the island that day. What happened in the next 90 minutes is where the confirmed record starts to fracture. The boat Nolan had arrived on, owned by a young man named Wyatt, started taking on water. The cause was straightforward. Too many people on board for too long in open water. This was not a slow leak. Warren Hudson described the situation plainly on a podcast later. It was an emergency. The group scrambled to deal with the boat. In the middle of that scramble, someone called out to Nolan, "Get on the boat." Warren Hudson's account is specific. His buddy yelled for Nolan. Nolan was right there sitting near the vessel. And Nolan said no. According to Warren, Nolan made a deliberate choice to stay behind. He wanted to remain on the island with Katie. His plan was to catch a ride back with someone else. Warren Hudson said it plainly. Nolan decided to stay on the island with the girl he was with. That is Hudson's account. On the record. In his own words. Katie's account, shared first through her sister publicly and later told directly to Christine Wansley in a private conversation, runs parallel to Warren's version, until it doesn't. Katie confirms she was there when the group called out for Nolan. She heard it. But here is the difference. Katie never heard Nolan respond. She never watched him make a decision. She got onto the boat she came with, assumed Nolan would figure out his own ride back and left the island. In her telling, Nolan had mentioned earlier in the day that he planned to reconnect with his friends later. She took that at face value and did not watch what he did next. Those two accounts are not identical. Warren says Nolan verbally refused and stated he was staying. Katie says she cannot confirm what Nolan said or did after the call went out. The difference between those two positions is not small. One is a witness decision. The other is an assumption. And what happened to Nolan after that moment is exactly what nobody can account for. Then there is the video. Sometime around that same window of the afternoon, a clip began circulating on social media. It was shot from a boat offshore and captured what appeared to be a confrontation on the island. Shouting, a physical altercation, someone appearing to demand something back. Attorney Ben Crump reviewed the footage and suggested publicly that Nolan appeared in it. Specifically that the person yelling was Nolan, demanding his phone be returned. Then Traciston Shepard stepped forward. Shepard, one of Nolan's close friends who had been on Horn Island since before Nolan's boat arrived, went on record with ABC News and said clearly, "That is my voice." He identified himself as the person yelling in that video. He said the altercation had nothing to do with Nolan. A stranger on the island had picked a fight with him, and the people in the video were trying to pull him back. Shepard said Nolan was not on the island at that point. He placed Nolan either on a boat or in the water, away from that scene entirely. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has not confirmed any altercation involving Nolan but did specifically ask for anyone with video or images of alleged confrontations to submit them directly to investigators. 2 witnesses. 2 versions. 1 missing young man. If this case has you asking questions that do not have clean answers yet, that is exactly why Unsolved Files exists. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. This case is still active. The investigation is still moving. And when the next development breaks, you will want to already be here. The boat left the island at 4:31 p.m. GPS confirmed. Nolan was not on it. At approximately 4 p.m. on July 4, 2026, a call went out from Wyatt's boat to Sea Tow, a private marine towing company that operates along the Gulf Coast. The Mississippi Department of Marine Resources released this audio publicly. It is not in dispute that the call happened. It is not in dispute who made it. What is in dispute is what else that recording contains, and that question has driven more public debate about this case than almost anything else. The confirmed content of the call is this. Wyatt told the Sea Tow dispatcher that the boat was at the west tip of Horn Island and that the bilge pump had stopped working. The boat was taking on water. He asked Sea Tow to come out, unsink the vessel, and tow it back to the mainland. The dispatcher asked about the passengers. Wyatt responded that everyone was on board and that nobody on the boat was over 21. He also told the dispatcher there were about 7 people with him. Sea Tow logged the call and prepared to respond. They never did. Before Sea Tow could deploy, the call was canceled. The boat had found help from another boater already on the water near them. That boater has been publicly identified through the Cajun Navy report and community discussion as Bart Edmiston Jr., a former teammate of Nolan's from Ocean Springs High School who had brought his own vessel to Horn Island that day. Warren Hudson later confirmed on a podcast that a nearby boater did assist when the boat started taking on water, and that this assistance allowed them to get the vessel stable enough to leave. The tow was canceled. Sea Tow stood down. Now here is the first factual problem that the call itself creates. Wyatt told the dispatcher everyone was on board. GPS data confirms the boat departed Horn Island at 4:31 p.m. Nolan Wells was not on that boat. Wyatt's own friends confirmed this. The friends themselves confirmed Nolan stayed behind. So at the time of that call, with Nolan still on the island, the caller stated to the dispatcher that everyone was on board. That single statement is confirmed to be factually incorrect. Whether that was a miscommunication, an assumption, or something else has not been officially explained. That is the confirmed content of the call. What came next is where the case moved into deeply contested territory. The background audio in the Sea Tow recording, the noise underneath the conversation between Wyatt and the dispatcher, became the subject of intense public scrutiny. 3 separate people attempted to enhance it. The first was Janetta Brantley, an independent audio engineer with documented professional experience in dialogue cleanup and audio restoration. She was transparent that her findings were her personal interpretation and not forensically verified. After running the audio through her process, she claimed to hear specific phrases in the background noise, including what she believed was a name and language suggesting someone was in distress. The second enhancement came from Nancy Grace's production team. Her in-house producer Sydney took a different technical approach, muting the primary callers entirely and isolating the background track before raising the volume. Sydney claimed to hear additional phrases in the result, including what sounded like a name spoken in anger, and language she interpreted as someone being told to stay quiet or be covered up. Nancy Grace presented Sydney's findings on air as a significant development. A third enhancement also exists and has circulated publicly, though it received less individual attribution than the first 2. Here is where the evidentiary picture becomes critical. A digital forensics expert who examined one of the enhanced versions found that the file ran approximately 20 seconds longer than the official source audio released by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. That same version carried a different digital fingerprint from the original. What that means in plain terms is that at least one version of the enhanced audio in public circulation was not derived from the source file. It was a different recording. Whether it was edited, reconstructed, or generated from a separate source entirely has not been officially established. but the technical discrepancy is documented. Beyond that specific problem, there is a broader technical issue with the enhancement approach itself. Amplifying background noise does not extract clean information from it. Audio enhancement raises everything in the signal equally: wind, water movement, overlapping conversations, ambient crowd noise, engine sounds, and any distortion already baked into the original recording. The human brain is wired to find patterns in ambiguous sound. That is not a flaw unique to dishonest people. It happens to trained listeners and untrained ones alike. What someone hears in enhanced background noise is not evidence of what is there. It is evidence of what the brain constructs from what is there. No court would treat unverified audio enhancement as conclusive for that reason. None of the three enhancements has been subjected to proper forensic audio analysis using validated tools and methodology. Ben Crump's legal team obtained the full CTO audio directly from officials. They have retained what they describe as top audio engineering specialists to conduct a proper forensic review of the complete recording. Not a clip, not a copy, but the original source file. That review was ongoing as of August 2026. No results have been released. What that call actually contains beyond the confirmed dialogue, nobody can say yet. Not honestly. Not with the current evidence on the table. Christine Wansley did not find out her son was missing from a phone call from law enforcement. She found out from one of Nolan's friends. At approximately 11:07 p.m. on the night of July 4th, her phone rang. One of Nolan's friends was on the other end, telling her that Nolan had not come back with the group. That call set everything that followed into motion. Christine immediately checked two location apps she had on her phone. Life 360 showed Nolan's device in one location. His Snapchat showed a different one. Neither matched where he should have been. She contacted her friend Tashima, the mother of Javun, another friend of Nolan's, asking if she had any information. Tashima's sons opened their own Snapchat to check Nolan's location while Christine continued working her phone. Nothing lined up. Nothing made sense. She reported him missing that night. The search that launched on July 5th was substantial. Multiple agencies responded: the U.S. Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and local search and rescue teams. The United Cajun Navy also deployed, including aerial resources. Horn Island was covered. The water around it was covered. July 5th produced nothing. No sign of Nolan. No confirmation of his location. The search stood down as daylight ended. On the morning of July 6th, at approximately 8:40 a.m., a park ranger made the discovery. A body had come to rest near the northwestern tip of Horn Island along the shoreline. The ranger reported it immediately. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed that dental records were used to make the official identification. The body was Nolan Xavier Wells. The United Cajun Navy confirmed separately that their aerial team had also spotted the body from above during that morning's search pass, which is how the location was first flagged to ground-level responders. There were two details about the recovery that the family and the public seized on immediately. The first was the clothing. The United Cajun Navy later clarified publicly that Nolan was not fully clothed when his body was found, directly contradicting what had been stated in earlier reports. Law enforcement did not officially elaborate on this detail. It has not been explained publicly. The second was the timing. Elmore Wansley, Nolan's father, raised this question directly and did not soften it. If Nolan went missing on the afternoon of July 4th, why did his body not surface until the morning of July 6th? That is a gap of nearly 40 hours between disappearance and recovery, with an active multi-agency search running through most of that window. Elmore said plainly that the delay did not add up. Brian Trasher, Vice President of the United Cajun Navy, addressed the timing question with forensic context rather than speculation. He explained that a body in open water does not surface or drift predictably. Water temperature, tidal movement, depth, and the physical environment all affect how and when a body becomes visible. On a holiday weekend with hundreds of boats anchored across that stretch of water, a body could remain below the surface and out of visible range for an extended period even during an active search. Trasher was clear that this explanation is not a conclusion about what happened. It is a factual account of how recovery operations work in open Gulf water. What it does not answer, and what no one has answered, is why the body came to rest near the northwestern tip of the island specifically. That question is now part of the active investigation. When a death draws this much public attention, two things tend to happen simultaneously. The official investigation moves at the pace the law requires, and the family moves at the pace grief demands. In the Nolan Wells case, those two tracks produced two separate autopsies. and between them more questions than answers. The official autopsy was conducted by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office. Jackson County Coroner Bruce Lind confirmed it was completed. The results are sealed. That is not unusual. District Attorney Angel Mears McGrath confirmed that in Jackson County, autopsy findings and active death investigations are withheld from the public until the case is presented to a grand jury. The grand jury, not the DA, not law enforcement, not the media, will be the body that reviews the full case file and determines whether a crime occurred. Until that process runs its course, the official findings stay locked. What is also locked is the toxicology report. No official toxicology results have been released. Mississippi Public Safety Commissioner Sean Tindall stepped in front of that vacuum directly. He issued a public warning that a toxicology report circulating on social media was fraudulent. Not leaked, not preliminary, not speculative. Fraudulent. Tindall urged the public not to share it and reminded everyone that no verified toxicology results exist in the public domain. His statement was pointed. Nolan's family, his friends, and Nolan himself deserve better than fabricated documents spreading as fact. On the other track, the family moved quickly. In the days following Nolan's death, Ben Crump, one of the country's most prominent civil rights attorneys, who has represented families in some of the highest-profile racial justice cases of the last decade, was retained by Christine Wansley and Elmore Wansley. Crump's team commissioned an independent autopsy. The examination was paid for by former NFL player Colin Kaepernick, who provided the funding as a direct act of support for the family's pursuit of answers. The independent autopsy was conducted by forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell. His findings were announced publicly on July 22, 2026, at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago. The cause and manner of Nolan's death were ruled undetermined, pending further investigation. The report found no confirmed fractures and no confirmed bruising on the body. That finding cuts in two directions at once. It does not support a violent physical altercation. But Dr. Mitchell was also explicit that his examination could not rule out the possibility of foul play. Here is why that matters, and why the independent autopsy has significant limitations that the family's own legal team has acknowledged openly. The examination was conducted without several of Nolan's organs, including his throat. The throat and lungs are the most critical anatomical areas in a drowning determination. Presence of water in the lungs, the condition of the airway, and specific cellular changes in lung tissue are what a forensic pathologist uses to establish whether someone drowned and, critically, whether they were conscious or unconscious when they entered the water. Without those organs, Dr. Mitchell could not make that determination. He could not confirm drowning. He also could not rule it out. Ben Crump said publicly that his team intends to coordinate with the doctor who conducted the official autopsy to request access to the original materials, specifically the throat, the lungs, and the photographs taken during the state examination. Crump has also raised a separate question about the condition of the tissue that was examined, referencing what he described as red discoloration found during the independent examination. He did not present that detail as a conclusion. He presented it as something requiring further expert review. Attorney Eric Hertz, who is leading the day-to-day independent investigation for the family's legal team, confirmed that discussions are ongoing about a joint forensic review of cell phones connected to the case. He said the team expects FBI involvement if that review proceeds. The DA's office told Crump's team that she is willing to consider some of their independently gathered evidence as the official investigation continues. 2 autopsies. 1 sealed. 1 inconclusive. And the most important organs, the ones that could answer the most important question, not yet fully examined by anyone working for the family. While the official investigation was moving behind closed doors and the autopsy findings were sitting sealed in a government office, something else was happening in public, and it produced one of the most operationally significant documents to come out of the entire case. Brian Trasher, Vice President of the United Cajun Navy, put out a call to the organization's network and to the broader public. He asked anyone who had been on Horn Island on July 4, 2026 to submit any photos or videos they had taken that day. Original files, unedited, with whatever timestamp data the device had preserved. What came back was compiled into a crowdsourced timeline document and released publicly. Trasher was direct about what the document is and what it is not. It is a collection of submitted material organized by approximate time. It is not a forensic report. It is not an investigation. Timestamps from personal devices cannot be independently verified without the original file metadata, and some images in the report were screenshots rather than original photographs, meaning timestamp data was already compromised before submission. Trasher acknowledged these limitations openly. The document is a starting point, not a conclusion. With that context established, here is what the document actually contains. One photograph shows multiple boats anchored side by side in the same stretch of water near the western tip of the island. The vessels are tied together close enough that people could move between them. The Cajun Navy labeled several of the boats in the image, identifying one as the Triton, the vessel Nolan arrived on that morning. Nancy Grace and New York Post senior national correspondent Caitlin Becker reviewed this photograph together on air and made an observation that cut straight to the investigative core of the case. That photograph is not just a crowd. It is a documented witness pool. Every person on every one of those boats had a direct line of sight to that area of the island for some portion of that afternoon. The question that photograph raises is not what happened to Nolan. The question it raises is how many of those people have been formally interviewed and what they said. A second category of submitted photos showed people in water that reached their chest and in some cases their neck. Not wading. Closer to treading water. Horn Island has a documented aggressive underwater slope. The transition from shallow to deep happens quickly and without visual warning from the surface. That physical reality does not explain what happened to Nolan. It does establish the conditions that were present on that shoreline that afternoon, and those conditions matter to any forensic reconstruction of how someone could enter the water and not come back. A third detail in the report drew significant attention. A photograph submitted to the Cajun Navy and time-stamped at approximately 4:50 p.m. after GPS data confirmed the boat carrying Nolan's friends had already departed the island at 4:31 p.m., appeared to show a young black man in blue swim trunks standing on the shoreline. The Cajun Navy could not confirm with certainty whether that was Nolan. No official source has confirmed it either. But if the timestamp is accurate, that image places someone on that island after the boat was already gone, and that detail is sitting inside an active investigation. On the subject of boats, Nancy Grace raised a procedural point that has practical investigative weight. Every registered vessel on the water carries identification. Investigators with access to those registrations can build a verified list of every boat present in that area and work backward to the people on them. The Cajun Navy confirmed that multiple people who recognized their own boats in the submitted photos had voluntarily contacted law enforcement. Bart Edmiston Jr.'s family, through their attorney Russ Latino, confirmed that Bart cooperated with investigators fully and voluntarily, no warrants required, no legal pressure applied. His boat and GPS device were both inspected. His family has called any suggestion of his involvement in wrongdoing false and stated they are pursuing legal action against content creators who made those claims publicly. This case has more open threads than most investigations see in a full year. If you are not subscribed to Unsolved Files yet, now is the time. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Every update on this case comes here first. By late July 2026, the official investigation into Nolan Wells' death had produced no public findings, no confirmed timeline beyond what GPS data already established, and no statement from the district attorney's office addressing the specific questions the family and the public were asking. That silence created a problem, not because silence during an active investigation is wrong, but because of what silence leaves behind. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter had stated early that the working theory was accidental drowning, that Nolan chose to stay on the island, entered the water at some point, and did not make it back. That framing came before the autopsies were complete, before the CTO audio was professionally analyzed, and before the Cajun Navy report was compiled. Ledbetter was clear that investigators were working to establish facts through eyewitness accounts, physical evidence, and verified information. He acknowledged publicly that accurate answers take time. But the gap between what he was saying and what the family was experiencing continued to widen. District Attorney Angel Mears McGrath's office did not issue regular public updates. A former county prosecutor with direct experience handling high-profile death investigations offered a pointed professional critique of that approach, not of the investigation itself, but of the communication surrounding it. His argument was specific. A DA's office is not required to share findings during an active grand jury process. But there is a category of information that can be released without compromising that process. How many witness interviews have been conducted? How many search warrants have been issued? What categories of forensic experts have been retained? How many tips have been received and logged? None of that touches the substance of the findings. All of it closes the gap between what is happening inside the investigation and what it looks like from outside. His closing observation was direct. From the public's position, there is currently no visible difference between an investigation moving carefully and one not moving at all. Ben Crump added a technical dimension to the investigation that moved beyond the audio and the autopsies. His team retained oceanic engineering experts to examine one specific question. Given the tidal patterns on the Gulf Coast on July 4th and 5th, 2026, is it consistent with those conditions for a body to enter the water near the western tip of Horn Island in the afternoon and come to rest near the northwestern tip 2 days later? Crump said publicly that in his team's preliminary assessment, the tides were not adding up. That review was ongoing as of August 2026. Attorney Eric Hertz confirmed the team was also pursuing a joint forensic review of cell phones connected to the case, with FBI involvement anticipated if the parties reached agreement. Christine Wansley said she respects law enforcement. She also said the early accidental drowning framing made both her and Elmore deeply uncomfortable. Her public statement was measured and clear. What the family wants is transparency. Not a verdict. Not a premature conclusion. Transparency. What the case also produced, and this is part of the documented record, was a wave of online behavior that crossed from public scrutiny into criminal territory. A California man named Joseph Dumars was arrested for making social media threats against Chancery Court Judge Ashley Cole. Judge Cole is the mother of one of Nolan's friends who was present on Horn Island that day. Her connection to the case is familial, not judicial. Dumars's threats were serious enough to result in a formal arrest. Mississippi's Attorney General warned publicly that law enforcement was actively monitoring threats connected to the case and would pursue charges. 3 of Nolan's friends, Warren Hudson, Jack Spatalo, and Morgan Seymour, launched a Give Send Go fundraiser to cover potential legal costs and pursue defamation claims against individuals who publicly accused them of involvement in Nolan's death. By early August 2026, the fundraiser had raised over $90,000. Traces Tin Shepard confirmed separately that he and other friends who were present on the island had also received threats following the case going viral. Criminal defense attorney and domestic violence expert Marie Pereira, who provided legal commentary throughout the case's media coverage, noted that the volume of misinformation and targeted harassment had reached a level that was actively interfering with the public's ability to assess the actual evidence. The investigation is real. The evidence is real. And the noise surrounding both is also real. On July 30, 2026, Ben Crump stood at the podium of the National Urban League Conference in Nashville and did something that reframed the entire public conversation around Nolan Wells' death. He did not present it as an isolated tragedy. Crump brought 3 cases to that stage simultaneously. Nolan Wells, Daniel Irving, Tyler Smith. 3 young black men. All 18 years old. All dead within 3 months of each other. In all 3 cases, the families were either disputing the official account of how their son died or were still waiting for one. Crump did not allege that the cases were connected by a common perpetrator or a coordinated act. What he alleged was a pattern. Specifically, a pattern in which the deaths of young black men move through investigative and public systems with less urgency, less transparency, and less accountability than the circumstances demand. He presented all 3 families together on the same stage, making the same request. Answers. Verified. Official. On the record. 9 days earlier, on July 22nd, Christine Wansley and Elmore Wansley had stood at the 117th NAACP National Convention in Chicago alongside Crump as the independent autopsy results were presented publicly for the first time. Christine told the room she had now gone more than 3 weeks without speaking to her son or holding him. She was not performing grief. She was reporting a fact. Her ask was simple and she repeated it consistently across every public appearance. She wants answers. Not assumptions. Not theories. Answers. Back in Ocean Springs, the community that raised Nolan held a public gathering in his name. The people who showed up were not strangers drawn in by social media. They were people who had watched him play football on Friday nights, who had hired him for summer work, who had grown up beside him. One person who had employed Nolan described the moment he came asking for a job before college. Said he needed to earn his own money before the season started. That person said Nolan's response was yes sir, and that it told him everything he needed to know about who raised that young man. Those people did not gather to accuse anyone. They gathered because they knew him. And because knowing him made the silence from official channels harder to accept. Here is what is confirmed. Not alleged. Not speculated. Confirmed. Nolan Xavier Wells left his family home in Ocean Springs, Mississippi on the evening of July 3, 2026. He cooked dinner for his parents before he left. The boat he traveled on departed the mainland at 9:56 a.m. on July 4th and arrived at Horn Island at 11:14 a.m. He spent the morning and early afternoon on the island with friends. He was last confirmed seen by any named witness around 3 p.m. The boat he arrived on departed the island at 4:31 p.m. without him. His mother reported him missing at approximately 11:07 p.m. that same night. A full multi-agency search on July 5 found nothing. On the morning of July 6 at approximately 8:40 a.m., a park ranger found his body near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. Dental records confirmed the identification. He was 18 years old. That is the confirmed record. Everything outside those data points is still being investigated, contested, or waiting on a process that has not yet concluded. Here is where every active thread in this case stands as of August 2026. The official state autopsy conducted by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner's Office is complete. The results are sealed and will remain sealed until the case is formally presented to a grand jury. District Attorney Angel Mears McGrath has confirmed that the grand jury will be the body that reviews the full case file and determines whether what happened to Nolan Wells involved a crime. No timeline for that grand jury process has been made public. No official cause of death has been released. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter has stated that authorities did not initially suspect foul play, but that determination has not been formally finalized pending the grand jury review. The investigation, by the DA's own account, is far from over. The independent autopsy commissioned by the family and conducted by forensic pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell returned findings of undetermined cause and manner of death, pending further investigation. The examination was limited by the absence of key organs including Nolan's throat and lungs, the anatomical areas most critical to establishing a drowning determination and assessing Nolan's physical condition at the time he entered the water. Ben Crump has stated that his team intends to pursue access to the original autopsy materials held by the state in order to have those specific areas examined independently. That coordination with the state medical examiner's office was ongoing as of the last public update. The full CTO audio recording is currently under professional forensic review. Ben Crump's team obtained the original source file directly from officials and retained independent audio engineering specialists to conduct a verified, tool-based analysis of the complete recording. This is the first time the audio will be examined using validated forensic methodology rather than manual enhancement. The results of that review have not been released. When they will either resolve the central question about what that recording contains or deepen it. There is no in-between on audio forensics. Either the methodology produces a defensible finding or it does not. Attorney Eric Hertz, leading the day-to-day independent investigation for the family's legal team, confirmed that a joint forensic review of cell phones connected to the case remains under active discussion. If that review proceeds, FBI involvement is anticipated. The DA's office has indicated a willingness to consider independently gathered evidence from Crump's team as the official process continues. Ben Crump's retained oceanic engineering experts are examining the tidal and current patterns along the Mississippi Gulf Coast on July 4th and 5th, 2026, specifically to determine whether those conditions are consistent with a body entering the water near the western tip of Horn Island in the mid-afternoon and coming to rest near the northwestern tip nearly 40 hours later. Crump has stated publicly that his team's preliminary assessment raises questions about that consistency. The full expert report has not been released. Brian Trasher and the United Cajun Navy have confirmed ongoing coordination with law enforcement. The witness pool identified through their crowdsourced photo and video collection remains a live investigative resource. Every registered boat in those submitted images represents a documented presence on the water that day, and every person on those boats is a potential witness. Christine Wansley has not stopped. She appears publicly, she speaks clearly, and she asks for the same thing every time. Answers. Not assumptions. Not early conclusions. Verified, official answers about what happened to her son between 3 p.m. on July 4th and the morning of July 6th. Elmore Wansley has said the same. They hired the attorneys, funded the independent examination, stood on the stages, and kept showing up because showing up is the only thing left to do when the official process moves at its own pace and grief does not. This case is not closed. It is not settled. It is not resolved by any stretch of any definition of those words. A grand jury will eventually receive this case. Forensic audio results will eventually be released. Title analysis will eventually be submitted. And somewhere in Jackson County, Mississippi, the official autopsy results are sitting in a sealed file waiting for the process the law requires to run its course. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He was supposed to start football training that week. Whatever the evidence ultimately shows, whether this ends as a tragedy, a crime, or something the law has no clean category for, his family has earned the right to know the truth. We will be here when it comes. Subscribe to Unsolved Files and turn on notifications. Because on cases like this one, the next development does not announce itself. It just arrives. And you will want to already be here when it does.